ancestors were descendants of Imam Musa al-Khazim, who dedicated their lives to religious instruction. After Khomeini's mother, father, and aunt died in the early 1900s, his older brother took care of him and made sure he got proper religious schooling. Even with Khomeini's strong religious background, he was unable to take a firm political hold in Iran due to the fact that Reza Shah, the king of Iran, had banished him. This was said in BBC's The Man Who Changed the World. The Shah had been faced with a choice, either banish Khomeini or execute him. Farah Pahlavi, the Shah's wife, stated that the reason they did not execute him was because if they did, Khomeini would become martyr for the people of Iran. Unfortunately for the Shah, Khomeini was very persistent in trying to obtain his mission of a revolution in Iran, even with banishment. From Iraq, Khomeini would send letters to people in Iran who would copy the letters and send them all over Iran, spreading the word of Khomeini. The letters would insist upon protests and strikes, and anyone caught with one of the letters would be arrested. The Shah did ban public gatherings, but the Muslims of Iran vehemently protested continually under Khomeini's orders. This social unrest caused the United States to become rather antsy, because at the time, Iran was America's biggest ally. This is because for 30 years, the Shah had worked with American presidents to promote Western culture in Iran and stop the spread of communism. American ambassadors to Iran would ask government officials how things were going politically, but the generals would say nothing about political disorder or revolution, which is what was happening with them. The Shah's attempts to create peace with his people were rather weak. He didn't offer any sort of reform for his Muslim people. The U.S.'s attempts to maintain allies with Iran were becoming more and more desperate as the revolution became more and more powerful. Eventually, the Shah and his wife did have to leave Iran, and they took sanctuary in the U.S. With the leaving of the Shah, Khomeini came back to Iran in 1979. His arrival marked the end of 2,500 years of monarchy. Now, with the Shah gone and Khomeini back in Iran after 40 years of banishment, many changes were taking place. Unlike the Shah, Khomeini definitely did not hold any torch for America. In fact, he stated, "America is behind everything that is wrong." Thus, this created even more tension between the U.S. and Iran. The U.S. government was really worried that Khomeini would retaliate against them. The splinter that finally shoved its way into splitting any hope at all for Iran and the U.S. was not by Khomeini personally, but a small group of students under his regime. The students feared that the U.S. would use the Shah against them, so they took action. They invaded the American embassy of Iran and took hostage all of the American ambassadors, and Khomeini did nothing at all to stop them. Now, it's fairly well known that when American citizens are taken hostage, America gets really mad. So this was a really radical move for the Iranians. Negotiations to free the hostages were simply, "Give us back the Shah and we will give you back your hostages." Eventually, after over 100 days in captivity, the hostages were returned to America. To conclude, because of the long period of tension when the Shah was in power suppressing his people, a man rose into power and revolutionized Iran. His anti-American views and Islamic Republic are still alive in Iran to this day. The tensions between Iran and the U.S. were all caused by this man. He changed the world with his persistence and revolutionary ideals. This man was Ayatollah Khomeini, and he was the most influential man of the 20th